In August 2019, Cyntoia Brown Long was released after serving 15 years in prison for the murder of a man who allegedly attempted to purchase sex from her after she was trafficked by an older man. Brown's fight for her eventual release from prison sparked a national conversation. And today, a 19-year-old named Crystal Kaiser is facing life in prison for allegedly murdering a man who she claimed sexually abused her in June 2018 when she was only 17, similar to Brown's story. Joining us now to give us insight into the severity of Kaiser's case is author, speaker, and advocate for criminal justice reform, Cyntoia Brown Long. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here today. So let's jump right on in. Cyntoia, you tweeted this the other day that the justice system is not equipped to understand cases like Crystal Kaiser's and mine. Here's my take on it from the Washington Post. So first, tell us how you first came to know Kaiser's story and what drew you to advocating for her.
So I came across her story and many other stories. I had mentioned a few of the other women that I had come across on social media, much like a lot of other people. And, what I saw was it seemed like history was repeating itself. And here was yet another situation where there was a young girl caught up with some unfortunate circumstances who reacted out of trauma. And the justice system wasn't necessarily trying to hear that. They weren't trying to see that. I was blessed to have been given a second chance. I was blessed that Governor Haslam looked at my situation with a different set of eyes. He wasn't looking at it how the justice system would traditionally look at cases like that. And, I was really hoping that that would translate into the way that judges start handling cases, into the way that legislators start considering legislation that controls sentencing and, the entire due process surrounding cases like this.
And, I have to ask, what are the similarities and differences you see between her case and yours? But most importantly, what has it been like for you to see someone that you see as similar going through the same thing as you are right now?
Number one, I think the biggest thing that we have in common was that we were both young women who were caught up in trafficking. And, you hear many people say, oh, well, these were young girls who were making this choice. They chose this and they put themselves out there in this way. But that's simply not the reality of the situation. That's not how the minds of young people work. Young people are by nature very susceptible to being manipulated by older individuals, and that's why laws are in place on statutory rape. That's why the law is in place. It says that anyone under the age of 18 committed in any kind of engagement where there is money being exchanged for sex, that is trafficking. It's never willful. It's never consensual. It's simply trafficking. Anyone caught selling, encouraging the sale of, or even purchasing a young girl for sex is by law a trafficker. So that's the first thing that I saw in common with this case. What's different, however, is that in the state of Wisconsin, there's actually a law in place that says that anyone who's being trafficked who commits any offense has an affirmative defense. But in Ms. Kaiser's case, the judge ruled that he wasn't going to apply that law to her.
And, taking all this into context, you write in the piece that the justice system is not equipped to handle cases like you all's. Why do you think that is?
The biggest thing is that the justice system, it doesn't see us as people. So it doesn't really understand the human experience. There's not room for mercy. There's not room for really taking into consideration what was this person going through at this time. When it comes to the justice system, you have this rigid set of rules. You have these statutes that different people are arguing that certain ones should apply, and whatever sounds the best, that's what goes. So the person is actually removed from the equation, and that's on both sides, on the defense and on, when it comes to the victims of crime.
And what do you think needs to happen in order for Kaiser to beat her charges?
Number one, I think that the legislators who passed the legislation, the safe harbor laws that said, anyone that commits any offense, it's very clear how it's worded in the statute. I think that they should step up and they should clarify that no judge can just choose to ignore what's been passed. They can't choose to ignore what the statute states, that if that's what the statute states, that's what it needs to be. They can absolutely do that. There are appeals courts in place who can also rule that a judge cannot simply ignore statutes providing for an affirmative defense for Ms. Kaiser. And, when it all comes down to it, just you have to pray that people's hearts and minds will be open to seeing this as a young girl and to really putting themselves in her situation and having some compassion on her.
Well, building upon that, according to the State Department, prosecutions of sex trafficking has gone down tremendously lately. But before his death, Kaiser's 33-year-old abuser was under investigation for sex trafficking allegations. Do you think the prosecution has taken any of this into consideration with Ms. Kaiser?
It doesn't seem like it. I know that what was interesting to me in looking at the ruling in that case was that, the judge, he acknowledged that there was trafficking going on, that she was being trafficked, but he simply said that she can assert an affirmative defense under the subsection 1, which I believe that the trafficking section that says any offense was 1A or 1M, something like that. But he said that she could be given some consideration for her circumstances, but only to the extent that she would receive a reduction that would entitle her to 60 years in prison instead of a complete life sentence.
Wow. Well, as this case has gone on, advocates have also voiced concern that the prosecution and judge have a racial bias against Ms. Kaiser. Do you have any thoughts on that? And how have you seen racism play out in cases like you all's?
I think whenever we see a situation where there are certain individuals who have chosen to not apply laws or not apply certain standards of compassion to certain classes of individuals, we have to say, what is it that distinguishes this person from another? So, it does seem suspect because, like I said, this law is in place. Why does it not apply to Crystal?
And do you think that the criminal justice system and how it's built today could ever even reckon with the racism that you have yourself experienced in the system?
I think it's very easy. You treat people as equal. You give one person the same compassion that you would give another. And it shouldn't matter if you can afford representation. It shouldn't matter if you can afford to bail out. It shouldn't matter. So many different things that come into play that studies have shown that matter. It shouldn't matter if you're economically depressed. You should get justice just the same as anyone else.
And speaking of justice, this past December, you tweeted this photo saying, "Justice for Crystal Kaiser." So, Cyntoia, if Kaiser were to be released, what policies do you think should be considered to decrease the occurrence of trials of alleged sex abuse victims who take action against their abusers?
So everyone, can take it upon themselves to start talking with their legislators about the laws in place in their state. Educate yourself on the cases in your state. How does your state deal with these cases? And just start advocating for legislation that says different factors are going to be considered when it comes to these individuals. There are drug courts. There are all these different courts that offer some level of compassion, some level of understanding to situations. Why not trafficking courts? Why not courts that deal differently with women who react out of that trauma? And a big part of that is understanding what really goes on in the minds of people when they're put in those situations. It's really understanding, how it can happen that a woman who's being trafficked can go on to commit different offenses in the course of being trafficked. And it's not always as black and white as it seems.
And you mentioned earlier the Safe Harbor Bill, which has made its way through the Wisconsin State Senate and Legislature. Do you think this type of bill is the solve for people like yourself or Crystal as they experience different forms of violence like that have been alleged here?
I think it's a start. I think it's good for us to start talking about these individuals and these women and understanding, the experience of women in this country. And all of this has been coming to light in the past few years, and what it's really like to be a woman in this country, what it's really like to be a woman going through these circumstances, and just having a different approach when it comes to justice and when it comes to responding to women and their claims when it comes to charges.
100%. So I want to circle back to your own case and read a few tweets. Here's one from Kim Kardashian in 2017. The system has failed. It's heartbreaking to see a young girl sex trafficked, then when she has the courage to fight back, is jailed for life. We have to do better and do what's right. I've called my attorneys yesterday to see what can be done to fix this. Hashtag free Cyntoia Brown. And here's part of Rihanna's 2017 post on Instagram. Did we somehow change the definition of justice along the way? Because something is horribly wrong when the system enables these rapists and the victim is thrown away for life. So Cyntoia, since your release, people have used this phrase, the Kardashian effect, when discussing cases that get celebrity backing like yours. And many have worried that the countless cases that don't get celebrity attention aren't getting enough attention as a whole. So what are your thoughts on this celebrity or Kardashian effect? And do you think celebrities can help change a systemic issue within the criminal justice system as a whole?
I think that anyone with a large audience of people who are listening to what they have to say, I think that they can start conversations, they can start dialogues. I think that's very important. The conversation about trafficking is a very important conversation that needs to be had. But when it comes to actually creating change, we need to start thinking about how we create change for everybody, right? Not just the names that we know. And that's why I was moved to write this article in the Washington Post, because we just know a few names. There are so many women who've been through the same situation, who've been through similar circumstances. Anytime we see someone who is on our timelines, think about all the hundreds and thousands of people who we won't see, who we won't learn about. And so when we actually come together to create concrete legislation that actually overhauls these practices that landed them in this situation in the first place. For me, when we actually can change the law that says that juveniles get the same amount of time as adults, when we can actually change the law that says we're not going to actually give any kind of mitigating circumstances consideration to what this young girl went through as being trafficked, when we can change those laws and put things in place that give that consideration, it just broadens the effect for so many other people. And whether you know their name or not, everybody is entitled to justice.
And speaking of that, what can people do today to get involved and help people like Crystal Kaiser and others whose names we do not know?
So just do your research and get involved. When I first heard about her, I spent like 3 or 4 hours just really researching, okay, what really happened with this case? Why is this going on right now? What are the laws in Wisconsin and how do we get to this point? And that's what people need to do in their own states. Look at the laws in your state. It's very easy. You can Google anything nowadays. Technology is wonderful in that aspect. And look at some of these loopholes. Look at some of these things where it's like, well, that doesn't seem right, and that doesn't seem that it would really leave room for compassion for this person. And start talking to legislators. You can look up who is over your district when it comes to the House of Representatives, when it comes to the state Senate. You can go to these individuals and you can tell them, look, I don't think this is right. I think this needs to be changed. You can find a sponsor that will help you draft a bill and put it before the legislature. Start drumming up support in your community. It can be done. Like, this system, it's not that hard. And, we can all do it. We're all equipped to do it. And with the internet, nobody has any excuse.
I love that. With the internet, no one has an excuse. Let's get that on a t-shirt and send that out to people. So, Cyntoia, less than 2% of cases in Tennessee are given a clemency hearing, and you were granted clemency exactly 1 year ago today. Take us back to that day. What was your reaction when you heard the news on January 7th of 2019?
Oh, that was a glorious day. I just felt so blessed to know that, God sees me. He has seen me throughout this whole situation, and he has moved, all these individuals to come together and just wrap around me. But, that day he moved Governor Haslam to grant me a second chance. And for me, that meant my life mattered too. And it was incredible. It's hard to believe it's been a year.
It moves fast. It moves quite fast. And since that year, you've released your own memoir, Free Cyntoia, detailing your fight for justice. So what was it like to finally get to tell your story in your own words fully?
There is power in being able to use your voice to speak to your experience and not allowing other people to write your story, not allowing other people to tell your story. So it was amazing just to finally be able to speak and to talk about all the things that led up to that moment of me being incarcerated. And I feel like it was important too because it sheds light on the experiences of so many women that you would never hear their experiences otherwise. They're not part of the mainstream media. They're not part of that conversation. And I thought it was very important to give voice to that.
Well, speaking of giving voice, what are your other plans for the future? And do you have any projects you can tell us about before we let you go?
Absolutely. So January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. This Saturday, the 11th, is actually Human Trafficking Awareness Day. And I will be working with a group of individuals, a group of young women, and we are going to launch the Glitter Project. And the Glitter Project is basically just a conversation. It's a dialogue about teen trafficking, exploitation, and rape, what it means to us, what it really means, some of the myths, and really just opening up a conversation, hoping other people will join in. We're going to be posting some things on social media, talking about it, using the hashtag The Glitter Project, and encouraging other people to do the same.
Okay, well, you have a busy week ahead of you, so thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, up next, more MTDM. Stay tuned.